father loss, fatherlessness does shape us. Widowhood, being left alone, is part of our story, but it does not define us. God truly steps in as He promises. Welcome to Raising Fatherless Kids, where we believe that
God is a father to the fatherless.
God is a father to the fatherless.
God is the father to the fatherless.
God is a father to the fatherless.
Welcome to Raising Fatherless Kids. I'm your host, Lori Apon, and this is a really special day. It is the 4th anniversary of the podcast, Raising Fatherless Kids. If you've been with me from the beginning, thank you so much. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what was your favorite episode? What have you learned from listening to the stories and all the episodes on children growing up with an absent dad? If you would take time to leave a rating, leave a review, maybe send me an email, lori@perspectiveministries.org. That would be like getting a birthday card, just with affirmation, and I'm sure it would be able to give insight on how we move forward and what that would look like. But I remember that I just felt very impressed to start a podcast, along with the rest of the world, of course. 4 years ago was really when podcasting started to blossom, and I love it. I have just a few podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis, but I love being able to learn and grow and be encouraged by people who have taken the time to share through the podcast format. And so I love this opportunity because it is my passion to encourage you, mom, if you're a widowed mother, if you're a single mother, if you're a young person growing up with an absent dad. It is my joy to encourage you. It is also my passion to disciple you and to mentor women who are coming behind me, mothers and children who are experiencing the absence of an earthly dad. And for those of you who need hope, I say this often, you're going to get to the other side. You'll get to the other side of the valley, and believe it or not, you will get to the other side of parenting. The days are long and the years are short, and they are so valuable, and you are doing such an important work. And so Perspective Ministries has a lot of branches on the tree of our ministry, but the podcast is one of my favorites. And so thank you. Thank you so much for taking time to listen. One of my favorite parts of the podcast is when I have the opportunity of bringing a guest on who grew up without a dad for whatever reason, death, divorce, desertion, and I ask them to share their story. I call these men and women trophies of grace, and I'm always encouraged by their stories. Revelation 12:11 tells us that we will defeat the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And many of the stories of the men and women who have been on the podcast, they have become contributors into our book, Absent Dad, Present Father. It's a resource that I feel will be helpful to you as a single mom. You can use it devotionally with your children. There are 30 stories in that book, and so you can read a story once a week, maybe every 2 weeks, and there's a devotional section, some questions for reflection. But these men and women talk about their trial and their loss, and then they talk about what it was like for God to step in as a present father. And so as I was looking back over the stories through the years, and the different circumstances, the different things the men and women went through. Some experienced a painful divorce of their parents where their dad just walked out. They experienced desertion. Their dad was in prison. They faced abandonment. And even though their stories and their circumstances are different in that way, I have found that they did experience similar struggles and victories. And so I've compiled a few things from all of those stories that I pray will help you, Mom, to be able to have an understanding of father loss. And maybe you're listening. I know a lot of people tune in, and this isn't your story. You're not a single mom, but you want to learn how to serve those who are going through this painful time. And I'm so thankful that you're here. And so here's some things that commonalities from men and women who experienced an absent dad. And the first is that the loss is deeper and it lasts longer than most people realize. It's not something that you just get over. You really don't. Fatherlessness and the pain of an absent dad doesn't end when they turn 18. In fact, many times this is when the young person begins to really wrestle with that loss. Maybe they made it through childhood and now they're into adulthood and they experience those milestones that amplify the absence. Graduations, maybe a wedding, maybe it's their own wedding and getting married and becoming a parent. And becoming an adult does not remove the longing for the love of a father, his encouragement, affirmation from an earthly dad. And yet, it's there. It's a father wound that, yes, you can push into it, and maybe it doesn't sting like it once did, but the scar remains. But even more than that, another common struggle is the greatest battle for a lot of these men and women is their identity is challenged. They wrestle with common questions from the loss that they've experienced, the deep hurt, the rejection, and the abandonment. And this isn't always the case for those who have lost a dad by death and from sickness, but for those who experienced a traumatic loss with the absence of their dad, they wonder, am I wanted? And was I not worth staying for? And am I going to repeat my father's mistakes? That father wound attacks their identity, and yet perspective changes everything. When they shift their identity from connecting it to their earthly dad and they transition to their present father, healing will begin to take place. This is a transition, and I say it often, it's not going to happen overnight. In fact, it might get really messy and dark. There might be ashes before the beauty. There might be night before the morning. But I do believe healing will come. And anger is there, even when it's quiet, even when it's silent. Some may be visibly angry, and you can't deny that they are wrestling and they are mad. They're angry. And then others can bury it, but it's still there. When it's under the surface, it may take the form of achievement, being really busy, even getting involved in ministry, or they have this appearance of being really strong. And that adrenaline that has carried them through their childhood may have been God's grace that's bringing them to adulthood where they're a little bit more mature and they've had time to process, but now the hard work must be done. It is possible for them to move forward and be successful. And they want to find purpose, but they still carry deep pain. And so that's when this father wound will often show up in unexpected ways, and their performance becomes a form of protection. And there are similar patterns that I've observed as I've listened to these stories over and over again. Many without a dad, even though we hear all these negative statistics, on the other end of the spectrum, you may have high achievers, and they're determined that this loss isn't going to ruin their lives, and that's a good thing. Many young people children who go through this loss are forced into an early maturity. They have to grow up faster than they would have, and that's hard. Mom, it's hard. It is hard, but we have to trust that God is sovereign. And often, instead of becoming weak, they become really strong almost way too soon. They become fiercely independent, and some will share that those they loved were not trustworthy, and so they have to work through learning how to trust others and maybe even learning how to trust God. That can be challenging, but God keeps His promise found in Psalm 68:5 that He is a father to the fatherless. He is the one who is able to draw them to Himself. And this is where I found rest, and this is where you will too. God will father through others, and over again through the stories, men and women would talk about a coach or a leader, a church leader. Maybe it was their pastor. They had mentors. It could be a family member, a grandfather or an uncle, teachers. These were the vessels that God used for His fathering. And it's not always easy to watch men stand in the gap for your husband. It's not, but it's necessary. And it's a beautiful way that God cares for our children. And so, ladies, it's important to pray that God will send these people. They're there, most likely. Sometimes we have to give them permission to be involved in our lives. Sometimes we can just look to them from a distance, and you never know when God is going to send a mentor to use in the life of your son or daughter. It may be different than what you imagined, but God is able to care for them in that way. And pray for those men and pray for their wives and thank God for them. Let them know they are a gift. And even though there's often amazing mentors, the greatest pillar point in almost every testimony and almost every story is when they came to the place of forgiveness. Forgiveness opened the door for freedom. And again, this is not something that comes quickly. Sometimes we don't even realize that we're holding unforgiveness in our hearts. Sometimes we don't even know that a root of bitterness has formed. And so this is not excusing the offense or the abuse. It's not minimizing the harm, but it is releasing. It's releasing that person from having a hold over you for the rest of your life. They've already done enough damage. They've already ruined this part of your life, but God can take what was meant for evil. He can use it for good. Don't let them hold you in bondage for the rest of your life. And we see that healing often begins at the point of forgiveness. And even then, trusting God as Father is not always immediate. I've heard stories that I was told God was my father. I didn't want Him to be my father. I wanted my dad. And so seeing God as a father is a process. And again, many struggled at first. And then over time, trust began to grow. As they got into the Word of God, His Word brings healing. Maybe God allows another crisis in their life. He works through trials. We shared recently on another episode about Manasseh. He's the son of Hezekiah, and God allowed him to go into bondage and captivity, and it was through that affliction that he cried out, and he repented, and he came to know the Lord. That's not easy for us to watch when we're sitting in the seat of being out of control, watching our children go through those times. But moms, pray. God is there, and sometimes trust grows through provision. Maybe God steps in and He works in a way that was only to God be the glory. And God is faithful. He's consistent. He is there. And God is patient with us in our journeys. And He's often then going to bring us to a place where He will use our pain for a purpose. There's even a ministry, Nothing is Wasted, and that is an amazing podcast, and I'll put a link to that podcast in the show notes. But it's amazing when we can turn back and we can comfort in the way that we've been comforted. Zach Garza, he's in the book. He's been on the podcast. I hope to have him again. He started a whole ministry, a whole nonprofit, the Mentoring Alliance, where he is now mentoring others. And boy, talk about anger. He experienced anger. Talk about the value and importance of forgiveness in his life. It was that pillar point, changed everything for him. And then sometimes we find men and women who will start or serve in a cause that is to help others in the way they wish they had had the help. Maybe they are now stepping out and protecting children if they were abused. And maybe they're adopting children, and who knows? Who knows what God is going to do for you and your children. But He is allowing you to experience pain and suffering, which is going to allow you to move forward with compassion. And you'll be able to break generational patterns in your family, and you're going to be able to make a difference and make a change. Father loss, fatherlessness does shape us. Widowhood, being left alone, is part of our story, but it does not define us. God truly steps in as He promises. And so again, the resource Absent Dad, Present Father, prayerfully it'll be out soon if it's not already out, and we will be sharing that on social media because it's a resource you're going to want to have. If you're a single mom, a widowed mom, it's a resource that you're going to want to share with others. Maybe even if you're a church leader, you're going to want a copy of this book. I'm really excited about it, and I'm excited about the days ahead for this podcast. I sit back and pray, Lord, how would you want me to encourage these moms? And one of my favorite lines of encouragement is that your children, when they put their trust in God, are going to be okay. You're going to be okay, Mom. You really will be okay if you put your trust in God. And so if you have a story where you've experienced an absent dad, reach out to me, Lori at perspectiveministries.org. I'd love to have you on the podcast. If you have a topic that you want us to cover, if you know of someone that would be helpful to have on the podcast to encourage single mothers, please let me know. I want to know what you would like to hear. That's important to me. But single mom, your child is not destined for further destruction. They're not destined for doom because of father loss. And if you're fatherless and you're listening, your story is not over. God is with you. And so be encouraged. There's hope. And for those of you who listen week in and week out, thank you. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Again, send me a birthday card. Send me a word of encouragement. Send me give us a review of how God has used this podcast in your life. And thank you for celebrating with us. I hope you have a good day.